Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today's top 25 is going to be a little different. I'm giving you the top 25 Transformers Generation 1 Decepticons. These are the bad guys, allegedly. Now, if you know the lore, they're not the bad guys, because Megatron was the head of the mining union on Cybertron, and all he was trying to do was give workers' rights, and the fascist Autobots were trying to squash that, and that's how the war started. But we don't need to get into the lore. We're just going to talk about who are the best of the bad guys. Number 25 is Astro Train. Astro Train is a really cool character in the cartoon and comics, but an even better toy, because he's 3 toys in 1. Now, all Transformers are 2 toys in 1. You get an action figure and a vehicle. Astro Train is awesome because he's a fucking triple changer. He starts out as a robot, and he's a pretty good robot. He's got articulated arms, no legs or head movement, but he has articulated arms, which is about the best you were going to get out of a G1 brick. He could transform into a space shuttle, which was very reminiscent to the NASA shuttle we had at the time. Or you could flip a few panels, turn him upside down, and he transformed into a steam engine locomotive, which was pretty cool, because he was actually designed in scale to an HO scale model train. So you could use him as an actual HO scale model train with your model train. And he had actual working train, the little, what are they, wheels or whatever?
Track.
Yeah, so he could actually roll on the track, which is a really good, so it's technically 4 toys in 1. Really good bargain for the price, because he was a mid-tier Transformer, which means he wasn't expensive at the time, and because he's been reissued multiple times, he's not that hard to get today. Number 24 is his companion, the slightly superior, but also somewhat controversial, Blitzwing. Why is Blitzwing controversial? For one, his name, Blitzwing. It's a reference to World War II's Blitzkrieg. And yes, he transforms into a German Nazi tank. And his third mode, as a triple changer, is a German Nazi warplane. So, yeah, he's a bad guy all the way around. But he's a cool-ass fucking tank. I mean, you know, the Nazis were not good people, but they were good engineers. Anyways, Blitzwing is pretty cool because he's your standard Transformer. He comes with missiles and a gun and everything else, but he also comes with something not very many Transformer figures came with, a sword, which is pretty fucking cool. Number 23 is LaserBeak. Now, you could swap out LaserBeak with the other one, and I forgot his name because it's the exact same toy. It's just a different paint job. But it's LaserBeak. He was the one that we had in the cartoon. Buzzsaw is the other one. The reason why Buzzsaw wasn't featured in the cartoon is because he came packaged with Soundwave, so they weren't trying to sell you Buzzsaw. They were trying to sell you LaserBeak. LaserBeak is a micro cassette that transforms into a condor. Well, a robot condor. Now, as a toy, he's pretty neat because, as a cassette, he actually does fit inside Soundwave's cassette deck mode in tape player form, which adds to the illusion of, yeah, you got a toy tape deck. His Condor mode leaves a lot to be desired. He has no real articulation to speak of. He can kind of sort of flap his wings if you don't mind breaking him. And he can bob his head because it's a part of the transformation. Again, if you don't mind breaking him. Which you don't want to do. Yes, he is a very fragile toy, by the way. I have broken more than one LaserBeak. It happens. He's not a very well-designed toy, to be fair. But he still makes the list because he was one of the best villains in the cartoon. And that's worth something. Number 22 is Dirge. I put Dirge on this list because of the Conehead Seeker Jets, he's the only one that's worth your money. He looks like a proper Decepticon Seeker Jet. Thrust looks like some weird, obnoxious spaceship thingy. Fancy. I don't like Thrust. And Ramjet just looks like Dirge, but with a shittier paint job. If you're only going to buy one Decepticon Conehead Seeker Jet, buy Dirge. Beyond that, he's identical to the other Seeker Jets. He has the same core body and the exact same transformation. He's basically Thundercracker with different wings, and that's basically all he is. But Thundercracker's still a dope-ass toy, so what are you going to do? Number 21 is Trypticon, also known as Decepticon City. Trypticon is pretty cool for several reasons. Again, he is technically a triple changer, so he is 3 toys in 1. But unlike the vast majority of Transformers of this era, he does not have a robot mode. He starts out as a city, which is home of the Decepticons, and he comes with a shit ton of dope-ass play features. And he can transform into a heavily armed mobile battle station, just like his Metroplex counterpart. Really good toy. Really cool toy. However, instead of a lame-ass robot mode, no offense, he transforms into a motherfucking Godzilla. And that's fucking cool. He's the only actual kaiju in the Transformers universe, technically. And he's a pretty good toy. Number 20 is Mind Wipe. Mind Wipe is by far the best of the Decepticon Headmasters. And he's probably the only quality Decepticon Headmaster. Because the other Headmasters were inferior products that we don't talk about all that too much. Too much. Mind Wipe is he's a Headmaster, so he has a robot mode with a head that can detach when he turns into Vampire Bat mode. And yes, he is a Vampire Bat. And his head can detach and transform into a smaller robot with a gun. So he's, again, technically 3 toys in 1. Which is pretty cool. He's also pretty cool because he's got that deep purple and black wings, so he looks pretty vicious. He looks like a vampire. And he's a pretty mean character in the cartoons he was featured in. I know I'm going to get shit for this. People are going to call me stupid or whatever. This is not based on nostalgia. I didn't have any of these toys as a kid. None of them. Well, maybe 1 or 2. I had a broken Blitzwing as a kid, and there's like 2 more on this list I had as a kid, so this is not nostalgia. I'm putting Pretender Starscream on the list for a couple of reasons. 1, okay, I love the Pretenders. I do. I think they're the best era of Transformers in the Generation 1 timeline. I think the Pretenders product line is Transformers G1 at its best. And I know that's controversial because a lot of people hate the Pretenders. I love them. I love them for a lot of reasons. You get an actual He-Man style action figure. Kinda, sort of. Limited articulation, but it's a He-Man figure, more or less. And when you open it up, on the inside, you get a robot. And in this case, we get Starscream, who is basically the Decepticon General. The Air Commander is what his official title is. And he's one of the best characters in the cartoon and comics. With actual depth of personality. And, story arcs. None of the other Decepticons get any of that. So he's worth it just for that. Now, his Pretender shell is the same as all the other Pretender shells. It's just a different paint job and a minor sculpt modifications. Nothing special, but it is what it is. His inner robot, again, Not a great robot mode, but most Transformers of this era don't have great robot modes to begin with, so we gotta cut them some slack. Let's be honest. But he does transform into a fairly decent representation of the F-15 fighter jet that he was supposed to turn into, and it's not a bad toy, and a pretty solid color scheme. Number 18... Number 18 is the only, I believe, MicroMaster that's going to make this list. As I look over the list, I want to make sure that's true before I say it. It's the MicroMaster Airstrike Patrol. Now, the Airstrike Patrol is the Decepticon MicroMaster Seeker Jets, basically. And who doesn't want fighter planes and micro machine fighter planes that turn into miniature robots? How can you not love this? Number 17 is another one that is somewhat controversial, but he's going to make the list, and it's my list. His name is Scourge. Now, what I like about Scourge is he actually has a functional robot mode. You know, barely articulation in the head, but he has some movement in the head, which is rare for the time. He's got decent articulation in the arms and legs. Again, for the time. Not great, but not as bad as some of the others. He's got a really good robot mode, even if he didn't have the articulation. He looks like a robot. He doesn't look like a brick with a head stuck on the top of it. And his spaceship hovercraft mode is really fucking cool and was heavily featured in the animated film from 1986. Number 16 is kinda sorta cheating. And I'm gonna do this a couple of times on this list, probably. But it's Abominus. Abominus is the giant combiner form of the Terrorcons. When they combine together, they form Abominus. Now, there are other combiner teams in the Decepticon Legion. And, you know, the Scramble City Combiner toys, as they're referred to by Transformers fans, are actually some of the best, most sought-after toys among collectors. They are. And the Decepticons had almost 3 times as many combiner teams as the Autobots. So there's a lot more to choose from. But I really like the Terrorcons. Hunger, as a robot, is one of the best of these Scramble City combiner teams because he's actually very articulated. He's got head, arm, and leg movement. And I like the Terrorcons because they are pseudo-mythological monsters versus standard military vehicles, which we've had more than enough of in the Decepticon ranks. It's time we do something different, and that's what the Terrorcons are. And combined together as Abominus, he's one of the bigger, bulkier of the combiner teams, which makes him worthy of this being on this list. Number 15 is the leader of the Decepticon faction known as the Insecticons. His name is Bombshell. Bombshell's a pretty good toy. The Insecticons have some of the best articulation in the G1 era, especially among the Diaclone toy line that were brought into the Transformers. And Bombshell's the best of the 3. He's some sort of beetle. I don't know the specifics of what he is because I'm not an entomologist, but he's some sort of beetle. And what makes him cool is he's kind of got a power trip where he's like, you know, he's subservient to Megatron to a point, but he's also defiant to Megatron because he's like, look, we are not Decepticons, we're Insecticons. We work with you assholes because we also hate the Autobots, but we also do our own thing. And he makes that very clear. Also, he's got the cerebral shells, which allows him to implant a microchip in the brain of another robot, Autobot, Decepticon, etc., and take control of them. He's got mind control powers, which Mind Wipe also does have. I forgot to mention. But Bombshells are a really good toy. Really good action figure. Both modes. His bug mode is pretty scary and intimidating, and his robot mode is actually pretty well articulated for the most part. And looks good. Good looking toy. And he's an actual compelling character in the cartoon. I don't remember if he had a noteworthy presence in the comics or not. He didn't make an impact on me when I read the comics. So there it is. There's that. Number 14 is Deluxe Insecticon Ransack, who is by far the superior Insecticon from the G1 era. He turns into a locust, a yellow locust, by the way, and he's got a very scary and intimidating bug mode, and he has a pretty solid robot mode. Never featured in the media, but he is a pretty solid toy, and that's what we're talking about here. Number 13 is Rumble, and I'm talking about the blue tape. Not the red one. The red one is Frenzy. Get it right. Rumble is another micro cassette that transforms into a robot. Pretty simple. He is the... basically, he's the demolition expert of the Decepticons, and he's basically the front man, if you will, of the Soundwave cassette team. And he's got an attitude. And pretty decent articulation, again, for the time. Number 12 is Ravage. Ravage is just fucking cool. He's another micro cassette, but this time he turns into a panther. And he looks fucking intimidating and scary. And he was a legitimate threat in the cartoon. Like when Ravage showed up, the Autobots got scared. Number 11 is kind of sort of cheating because it's kind of sort of 3 figures. But it's not a combiner. And it was never sold at retail. It was only available as a mail away. We're talking Reflector. Look, I was a professional photographer for a good chunk of my life. I love cameras. I love video production equipment and things of that sort. Reflector turns into a camera. A flash camera. A pretty good high-quality camera with extensions. He would have been a $700 camera at retail in 1983 had you bought the camera he turned into. Yes, he would have been an expensive camera. He would be an expensive camera today if they still make... Well, I guess they kind of sort of still do make DSLRs, but anyways, that's what he would be today. Reflector is technically 3 robots that do not transform. What they do is they combine together to make a camera, which is very unique for the Transformers because there's only a handful of other toys that do this same thing. But he's still pretty cool. So, yeah, he's not technically a Transformer, but he's still a cool toy, so he makes the list. Now we're into the top 10. We're getting into the better ones. And you're going to call me a hypocrite because I got a couple on this list that go against a couple things I've already said. But like I said, things aren't always what they seem. You know, they're, shall I say, more than meets the eye. Number 10 is Skywarp. Of the 3 standard non-Conehead Seeker jets, he's my favorite, and he's one of the coolest. Skywarp is black and purple, which is really fucking intimidating for a villain. And, you know, he's the exact same toy as Thundercracker and Starscream, so he's the same toy. But he's the coolest looking one of the 3. You have to have Skywarp in your collection. And what we found out recently in a new toy line that came out, what, a year ago or 2 years ago, we found out that she's also transgender. So there's that. Number 9 is another Headmaster Decepticon that I didn't think was going to make the list, but he has to. It's Fangry. Now, yes, Mindwipe is awesome. He's a vampire, but Fangry's a motherfucking werewolf. Vampires are cool, but werewolves, you don't get a lot of werewolves. You just don't. So when you get one, and you get one that's is badass looking as Fangry is in werewolf mode, rubbish in robot mode, yes, I'll admit it, rubbish in robot mode, but badass in wolf mode, yeah, he deserves a high spot on this list. But the superior Decepticon Headmaster is also a triple changer, and it's Snapdragon. Snapdragon is cool because he turns into a dinosaur, but he also turns into, you know, a standard sort of futuristic Decepticon jet, and he turns into a very articulated robot mode. And again, he's the Headmaster. The head can pilot the spaceship or the robot. I'm just going to say dinosaur. I don't think he's a T-Rex, but he could be, I guess, maybe. We didn't know as much about dinosaurs back then as we do today, so it's questionable. Number 7 is another pretender, but he's well worth the money. His name is Skullgrin. His shell is a proper monster, a terrifying monster with a literal skull for a head, and, you know, I'm just going to say antlers and horns. He looks like a devil. And he's very mean and scary and intimidating. And he's got spikes everywhere. He could fucking throw down with Bowser and probably beat his ass. When you open up the shell, which is a cool toy all on its own, by the way. The Pretender shells are pretty fucking cool. And anyone who says otherwise needs to chill and revisit them. They're pretty fucking cool. But inside, his inner robot is actually one of the best Decepticon Pretender robots. One of the best Pretender robots of them all. Because his tank mode is hella intimidating and very scary and very well designed. It actually looks like a futuristic Cybertronian tank. And again, when you transform him into robot mode, he has a very, very well designed robot mode that is really articulated. All the Pretender inner robots are pretty well articulated, but he's got the best articulation. He's got movable arms that have different articulation. He can punch and swing, and his legs can kick, which is pretty good. So he's a rock-solid toy. Number 6 is Bruticus. I'm going to save you the speech. He's Bruticus. I mean, he's just a monster. He's made up of the Combaticon team, which are the most intimidating of the Decepticons, because he's, you know, they're military vehicles. Tanks and jeeps and helicopters and armored shuttles and stuff that combine together to form one of the biggest, most intimidating of the Combiner teams. And for all the good things I can say about Abominus, he could wipe the floor with Abominus. He's that awesome. But as awesome as he is, he's not as awesome as number 5. You knew Devastator was going to make this list. Come on. The Constructicons are the most popular, most sought-after Combiner team of all the Transformers in all of their iterations. Even the phony Autobot version from 2001 Car Robots, Robots in Disguise. Yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the 6 OGs. It's the only Combiner team in the entire toy line that isn't a Scramble City Combiner team. Well, not the only one, but the best one, I should say. But was also the first Combiner team introduced in the toy line. It's, instead of 5 robots, it's 6 robots. Which there are a couple other Combiner teams that have 6 robots, but we're not talking about them because they're not that great, to be honest. Or are they? And they further up on the list. Wait and see. Maybe. I don't know. Well, I know, but you don't know yet. Devastator's pretty cool because the 6 robots individually are well designed. Really good vehicle modes. Very accurate to what they're supposed to be. And pretty good articulation in robot mode. And really well designed robot modes. They look like robots. Again, which is a feature I actually enjoy from my Generation 1 Transformers. I value it highly. But when they combine to make Devastator, yeah, he's not the biggest, scariest, most intimidating of the Decepticon combiners, but he's the OG, and that's worth a shit. Also, he's the classic, and he's the one that ripped Autobot City a new asshole in the movie. Literally. Also, very prominently featured in the cartoon and the comics. And the individual characters had pretty fleshed out personalities, for the most part. Number 4 is Six Shot. He's a Decepticon ninja that transforms into 5 different things, kind of. He turns into some sort of tank thing, some sort of airplane thing, some sort of giant gun thing, and he's got a couple other transformations. He's not technically 6 different transformations, but they call him Six Shot. But we don't care what he turns into. He's a motherfucking ninja, and that's all that matters. Number 3 is Soundwave. If you collect Transformers at all, you know Soundwave is the greatest toy of them all. He could be number 1, but number 1 is number 1 for a reason. But Soundwave is the most popular, most beloved Decepticon character of the original G1 family. And he comes with a whole team of his own cassettes. And he turns into a pretty realistic looking Walkman, which was functional in Japan, but they removed the electronics when they imported him to the US because whatever. But Soundwave is still a pretty good toy and really intimidating looking robot mode, well designed. His face is the actual Decepticon emblem, so he's that iconic. And pretty solid articulation, again, for the time. Number 2 is the original Starscream. If Pretender Starscream is going to make this list, you know that the F-15 Seeker Jet version of Starscream is also going to make this list. He's the Air Commander. He's the number 2 in the ranks. And he was not Megatron's bitch, even though Megatron thought he was. He defied Megatron more than once, tried to kill him more than once, succeeded in overthrowing him more than once, and even created his own army, the Combaticons, which I just talked about. And was voiced by the late but beloved voice actor Chris Latta, who was also, Cobra Commander in the companion series A Real American Hero. Died a long-ass time ago, but it is what it is. Starscream is also pretty cool because, again, he's got a really good jet mode. And, yes, he's got the same standard robot mode as all the Seeker Jets. It's the same toy, they just recolored it multiple times. But he's got the best-looking design of them all, with his colors and everything. Because he's deceitful. He looks like he could land in a U.S. Air Force base and blend in. You can't say that about any of the other Seeker Jets. They look like bad guys. He looks like he could blend, which is the point. That's why they're called robots in disguise. He can disguise himself better than the others. And he was also the Decepticon scientist, which is a little known fact people forget. Obviously, I don't have to tell you what number 1 is. The greatest Decepticon Generation 1 Transformers toy of all time is the original Megatron. The die-cast metal Walther P-38 that is illegal today because it looks too much like a real handgun and cannot be sold because it actually got real people killed in real life. It is that scary of a toy. And yes, he is that scary of a villain. And that's my top 25 Transformers Generation 1 Decepticons. Let me know which ones you have and which ones you would have put on your list. Stay cool.